Hello and welcome to Soviet Championship Books. This is Chess Reviews 82. I'm James Pratt and I've got three books to show you, all fairly heavyweight textbooks. Now here's a book you probably haven't seen before, despite the fact that it's been the rounds. Published in America, RHM Press. And it is about one tournament, Leningrad 1974. What happened basically with the Soviet regime was that they realized fairly quickly that Fischer was not going to defend his title, which he won in 1972, you'll remember. And because of this, they somewhat eased up. So that in 1973, when Spassky won the championships, everyone was called to the flag. But in 1974 and subsequently, that wasn't the case. It simply wasn't. So although obviously these are interesting and the games, very involved and so forth, sadly, this is not what quite they thought. In other words, it doesn't reach the pinnacle of world chess, even for then, let alone for now. Various quotations from Keres, Sidney Fried, who was the publisher, and a preface by David Levy. That's surprising. This is a complete series of tournament books. It says the first of the series of tournament books. I think there were two or three others. Rijk en Zee in Holland, 1975. Picture of Tal here. Many photographs I will show you. Smoking as usual. And about to launch into. It was a shame. I was about to say defense of his title, but it wasn't, was it? But what I was going to say, it's a shame with Tal that his health just went up and down so much, because had it gone up during the cycle which Bobby was in, we would have seen an amazing World Championship match, I'm sure, with more pyrotechnics than the one against Spassky, which was highly competent technically, but not necessarily that exciting. They're talking about the rearrangement of the Soviet championships to be called the First League and the Super League. Well, you can call things anything you want, but it says it is played in the House of Culture, where the Karpov-Spassky match was held earlier in the year. That was the match to which Karpov won, and in so doing propelled himself forward to play Korchnoi. And the rest, as you know, is history. Little biography. It's quite useful, actually, of the players. Dvoretsky, better known as a trainer and writer, but here a player pure. Tiganian, Vastyukov, Cheshkovsky, Savon. He didn't have a very long life, neither did Pologaevsky. Gregorian, that's interesting. He's one of the stronger Armenian brothers, it says. Soviet master since 1965, achieved one norm towards the Soviet Grandmaster title. Yes, the Russians used to give internal titles. Keen got this idea and started giving them out himself. Bob Wade is a Grandmaster of the Commonwealth Chess Association, and Julian Simpol is helping out with the drinks. It has a list of how they qualified for the tournament, but quite a few of them were brought in as substitutes, I think. And here's a list of the players with their titles, age, and rating. In those days, the ELO list came out about once every 67 years, I think. Now it comes out every move, but there they all are. And with Tal, the favourite, along with Pologaevsky, Belyavsky. I'm just hesitating. Those would be the world-class players who in those days would have been 2600 or above. Now they'll probably be 2750 or something. Such as inflation. And here's the cross table. I will show you this because obviously that impinges very strongly on what's about to happen. Beliavsky did very well in coming first equal with Tal. I'm not sure if there was a playoff. They may have played off. I don't know. We'll find out perhaps. Taimanov, who was a candidate, came almost last. And Galko, who had a fairly bright future, albeit a bumpy ride life, was almost bottom, you see. Yeah, look, see? He ended up in the US. He's still there now, actually. And here we are looking at the games. A number of last-minute changes to the list of participants. That's interesting. The oldest player was Taimanov, if you prefer, who is 48. I've actually got another. I just noticed. Here's his book on the Sicilian. Much of his life was spent playing. He's dead now. Playing it. It's quite nice layout. Double columns, fairly relaxed, not unnecessary. Yeah, I quite like that. Obviously, some of the games are unannotated, but they've got a few diagrams thrown in. And it says the scores after one round, in brackets. Cafferty and Tal played an old book line, but the Latvian remembered the details much better, as can be seen from the fact that after 28 moves, Tal had 2 hours on his clock, his opponent just 5 minutes. In other words, Tal remembered it all. Beliavsky sat down against Taimanov, not at all adverse to a draw. The fact that his game was scheduled at 10 p.m. 10 p.m. There's no hour to be playing chess, is it? Here's a game between Beliavsky and Taimanov. It's an Imzo-Indian with notes by Bronstein. That's not messing around, is it? This is an English descriptive notation, which was the... It always amuses me, and I've said this countless times, that you hear people, possibly parents of children who are buying chess books, saying, oh, I wish that could be converted into algebraic notation, as if descriptive notation is so difficult to understand compared to the actual game of chess. Now, that is difficult to understand. As you can see, this page is here with only the score of the games and not annotations, but I always try and put in a few notes if it's possible. I don't see why it shouldn't be. I'm skipping ahead here. Beliavsky, with Beliavsky at the back. All of these games, you understand, would have been played on stage with wooden pieces at the back and people, little boys probably pushing them, pulling them around so the audience could see the moves. Now everything will be done electronically. And I'm not sure that playing in public is exactly such a good idea. I know a friend of mine said that when he went to Holland and watched the Grandmasters, they were upstairs and the spectators were downstairs being lectured to by somebody that was getting the moves. And here's Vaganian, a player I very much admire. There he is, thinking as hard as he can. I should think I would describe him as a cult hero. Never quite became world champion, probably enjoyed the world too much. He's still alive. I'm speaking of him as if he's passed away. Rafael Vaganian. Here's another game between Tal and Vaganian, with notes by Bronstein. Without guaranteeing absolute accuracy, I can name only 3 games in which this position has occurred: Keres Smyslov, Keres Taimanov, and a recent game of Grigorich's. Alas, I can't remember with whom. It's lovely that they put that in as if to, not saying that I'm omnipresent or Bernard Cafferty wrote, as only Bernard would, not an accurate note at all. And then gives about a 50-word correction, like the schoolmaster he was at the time, possibly actually was pursuing that trade or calling. Nothing else jumps out at me. Still more decisive games and a tragedy fatale, it says. Who lost to Beliavsky, who was catching up with him anyway and was to tie for the championships. Notes by Kart and Zaitsev. Now there's somebody you wouldn't often see in the international scene. Grigorian and Savon. Savon won the Soviet Championship in 1971. I think it was 71. But he never achieved anything so wonderful before or since. Well, we're coming to the end, and I'm sure they were relieved. Who wouldn't be after so many rounds? Was it 15 rounds? Yes, I think so. Index of annotators. It's rather good. About 30 names. That's impressive of itself, isn't it? Look. All the way down there. And then index of openings, with lots of emphasis on the Sicilian, the Queen's Gambit declined, and the English. And some adverts for other RHM publications, all of which I still recommend. There we are. So that's the first of the 3. I'll just show you again. If you see it on eBay or in a second-hand bookshop, it is worthy of your time. The next book was an award-winning part of a trilogy. I've got the second part, which I won't show you now, and I haven't got the third part at all. These were very expensive for paperback books. I don't know the price, but it was a lot of money. It contains an astronomical amount of information, as you might expect, of the Soviet Championship from the, I think, 1920s, right up till, yes, 1920 to 1937, so just before the war. Yeah, what we call the Second World War. The Russians may have had other names for it. Two people playing with gas masks on. I was thinking that's for a joke, although I know my mother said that they had to carry gas masks with them wherever they went and practice at school, putting them on. And I dare say, joking to one side, that's what's happening there. There's all sorts of first-hand accounts of the early championships. If you're interested in unusual chess men, here are some. If I hold it still, it'll show it to you properly, but there it is. Look. So there's 2 sets that side and 1 this side. Very ornate, I'm sure, and probably interesting to have little figurines around you, but you wouldn't be playing championship chess with those, would you? A cartoon. The Soviets are quite strong on cartoons. Romanovsky. Can't say I've heard of him, but it's just this says he didn't qualify. And here's Botvinnik in all his glory. Playing in his first Soviet championship at the age of 20. Botvinnik was, of course, to become world champion in 1948 and stayed there or thereabouts. He lost the title twice and won it back twice. Finally, bowing out to Petrosian. Now, you may very correctly say, well, why do we want page on page of reminiscences? Some evil tongues said that the latter two were masters of the last round, but this is simply unfair. To earn the Masters title, they had to pass a long ordeal, play 26 games against the USSR strongest players, and earned their titles not simply because of one win in the last round. More cartoons. And here, an annotated game using Rabars. This is number 50. And a little known to me anyway, Botvinnik game. I'll show you just to say it does become pretty dense in content. Diagram, obviously. As I say, this is game 50, but here is Botvinnik with a decisive game. Not the best of photographs, but I dare say it's a mock-up. I don't think the spectators would be sitting that close if they were actually playing the game. It's possible, I suppose, but I don't think so. Dreadful use of underlining if you're an expert on fonts, which I'm not. Look at that. It's terrible. You shouldn't do that. More reminiscence. A cartoon. More reminiscence. I don't. Picture of Botvinnik, deep in concentration. And here he is analysing with Rouser. As in Richter Rouser. That's Rouser there. There's Botvinnik, demonstrating, I'm sure, with infinite care and patience, his wicked ways. Here's Levenfish. It looks to be about the cross-country run. I think you would describe that as a lampoon. That's it. I mean, you can go 20 pages without finding a single game. Konstantinopoulos versus Rabinovich. I'm sure the notes are impeccable. More. I won't forget my last round meeting over the board. He was a great man, one of the organizers of the Soviet chess movement. He was sincerely overjoyed by the successes of younger players. He would often talk to me, even back when I was a rookie, debuting in the 7th championship. In other words, a learner. Notice I wore worn-out old boots and summer clothes in November. Nothing wrong with that. There's a game by somebody called Budo. Never heard of Budo. There we are, somebody on a bike. So you'll have formed the opinion that this isn't quite my favourite book, considering it was so expensive. I can't remember how much. Might even been £40. Quote from Sazonko, who's written a lot of books about more contemporary Russian dealings and was in fact Russian himself. Again, between Levenfish and Botvinnik. A match, I think, was more than a bit of fiddling going on. No disrespect to either of the players, they had to make a living after all, stay with their heads above water. In the last chapter, shows cross tables of all the championships from 1920 right through till, as I say, the outbreak of the Second World War. Like that. And there's lots of detail. Let's just quickly see what it says on the back. This book can be read on many levels, a careful selected collection of 107 best games, commented on mostly by the players themselves, supported by computer analysis. Yes, he doesn't swamp it out with that, which I appreciate. The book is illustrated in around 170 rarely seen photos and cartoons from the period, mostly taken from the 1920s and 30s Russian chess magazines, and it has a foreword by no less a person than Garry Kasparov. Well, that's the second of the third. This is published by somebody, Elk and Ruby. Elk and Ruby. There it is. If you like history, now's your chance. Now, from an okay book to a splendid book. This is my favourite. Look at that. Drink it in. The Soviet Championships by Bernard Cafferty and Mark Taimanov. Bernard Cafferty, British candidate master, probably FM as well, I don't know. Still around, although we haven't seen him in public for some time actually. I've made some inquiries, but he didn't emerge, so to speak. This was a Cadogan book. Cadogan changed their name because of the problems with Maxwell. You might remember he threw himself off his boat. I read somewhere that's not a very good idea. Pergamon Chess and Maxwell Macmillan Chess Lists. It says so as part of that series. This goes from 1920, as did that one over there, right round to 1991, which is when they would have begun their researches, and it encompasses an enormous amount of information, all the cross tables. There's an example. The first championship, which in a way, surprisingly, was won by that well-known globetrotter, Alekhine. There you are. Alekhine moved around a lot to keep body and soul together. Played for France, ended up in Portugal, and actually died there in a very sad stupor. The second championships, they give just one game or two games. One game, but with good notes, from 1923. Romanovsky, I think I showed you a cartoon of him earlier. Yes. The fourth championship of 1925, which was won by Boglyapov, who was in cracking form. I think 1925 was Boglyapov's best year. Looking down the table, there's quite a few people I haven't heard of. That's just my ignorance, but the sixth championship now, they tried different formatting. Yeah, it's always an idea to just know your stumps and try something else. So there's two qualification groups and a final. So the 16th championship, dancing ahead now, which was won by Bronstein and Kotov. Kotov was, like Keres, having been born before the second and third Russian revolutions, probably did have a pretty thin time of it amongst younger and increasingly getting younger and younger rivals. Halfway down the table, Keres. And even lower down, a much maligned Kolmov, an Averbach who was to play at candidates level, and Levenfish who wasn't, but in fact Taimanov was last. Little did he know that he was to qualify to play Bobby Fischer so many years later. Now, who is that? Who is that? Do you know? It's Leonard Stein. He died when he was 38. And there's a rumour, no more, that he was murdered because he was planning to abscond and skip the country because he was due to play in Brazil in the Interzonal in 1973. Somebody stuck a needle in his arm. He was due to come to Bath for a team event prior to that. He never made the trip. His towel was sallow floor. Bennett playing Bronstein. Korchnoi playing towel. Korchnoi here, Victor Korchnoi, and Mikhail Tal here, the Latvian. Beautiful photographs from the BCM library. When I spoke to Bernard about this book, he assured and reassured me that it was a spankingly good job, and I think it is. It's my favourite of all the books. It's 23 players in the 1969 Soviet Championships. Not all of the championships were used for qualification to the FIDE international events leading up to the world title. 1 in 3, 1 in 4 would have been. And they would have known in advance. My goodness, they'd have needed to have known, wouldn't they? Which ones were and which ones weren't. So here in 1986, you see that things are getting watered down a bit. Not all the top names are there. As chess becomes more global. And now it doesn't matter where you live. You can, in theory, become world chess champion. There's Beliavsky. Yudazin, a gentleman whose name I can't even pronounce and I've never heard of, and he won the tournament. So there you are. That's from Leningrad, 1990. Very nicely annotated games by Taimanov. And here are the minarets, the onions, on the cover. And this is published by Cadogan Chess, and it's called the Soviet Championships by Bernard Cafferty and Mark Taimanov, and very, very heavily recommended by me. The annotations bring these extraordinary and instructive struggles to life. Many important chess ideas and concepts were first discovered in these games. The introductions to each championship are equally fascinating, as the majority of these tournaments were played against oppressive political backdrop of communism. Revered chess masters could get away with more than most, but veiled threats by the authorities were always there for those who might consider stepping out of line. Da, 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 da. There is nothing better than bringing down the curtain with a bit of melodrama. This has been Chess Book Reviews 82. Thank you for joining us, and goodbye.